Hey. I said, hey! Do you recognize me? I bet I know what you're thinking. Not as short as you thought, am I right? That's not the only lie that's ever been told about me either. I've survived dozens of assassination attempts. Yet it's Waterloo no one shuts up about. Talk about not being able to catch a break. At least I can say those that tried to kill me did it with some style. I remember the night distinctly. I went ahead in the first carriage as Josephine and I were to attend the grand opening of Hayden's creation, and she realized she had misplaced her shawl. My carriage was driving down the Rue Saint-Nicaise. Josephine's was some way behind when we were abruptly rocked by the sound of the almightiest boom as screams of pain and panic assaulted us. I immediately suspected something untoward. Seeing that I was largely uninjured, I continued onward, lest I gave the braggarts a second attempt at separating my body and soul. It was a terrible night for the people of Saint-Nicaise. Many people were killed or injured in the blast, and I was later told that it was due to royalists who had rigged up some sort of an explosion involving a cart full of gunpowder in an attempt to see me off. The gumption of it, to think their infernal machine could harm the great Napoleon? I, the leader of the French Empire, taken out by some upstarts? I think not. Luckily, thanks to my vast intelligence, I had already a feeling something like this was to happen tonight, hence making up the story why Josephine was delayed. Ha! I caught you too. I'm not so foolish, my friend. Suspecting someone may take the opportunity to kill me, I adjusted my timing slightly to throw them off the scent. Trickery and deceit are crucial skills for an emperor to master, and in allowing their attack to fail, I set myself up cleverly to take down their entire campaign just a few months later. It was no surprise I survived. After all, a simple bomb to take out the leader of the French Empire? However, I'll admit that moment was alarming. But did you know one of the scariest moments of my life actually involved a horde of rabbits? Oh yeah, you heard right. Forget the Rue Saint-Nicaise. Nothing came as close to terrifying as seeing hundreds of fluffy tails bouncing toward me. So one day, I gathered my finest commanders and instructed my chief of staff, Alexander Berthier, to capture plenty of rabbits for us to have a jolly good go at. Nice man, Berthier. Unfortunately, he was always a bit of a Burk. Can you believe he actually acquired tame rabbits? I ask you, what sort of hunt was that to be? I can tell you, I've feared for my life over the years, but I've never feared a fluffy little rabbit until that day. Before I knew it, thousands upon thousands of those things had broken off into a two-line formation, heading straight for me. Their ferrety little claws were all over me. The creatures were climbing up my legs and clawing their way to covering me with their cottontails. I had nowhere to run, nowhere to turn. Was I about to die smothered by rabbits? Believe me, my friend, I asked myself that very question. Luckily, my bravery once again saved the day as we beat the furry beasts away and recovered my stance. Bellowing at Berthier he was a fool, I took to my carriage to protect myself from any more twitchy nose attacks. Then, Thibault went and wrote it all down in his book. Bet people will have a field day with that one when I'm gone. Are you laughing at me? Well, laugh it up. Rabbits might have gotten the better of me, but they're one of the only things that ever did. It's thanks to me half the world is as it is today. Without me, we never would have discovered the stone from Rosetta. It was 1798, and I took 50,000 of my best men up the Nile to Egypt. Fascinating country, one that had been underappreciated for far too long. I honestly now look back on my time in Egypt as the most perfect period of my life. It was a time of progress and science. My scholars were finding new treasures every day. I got to learn the peculiar habits of the Egyptian people. Did you know they wrap people in bandages when they die? Anyway, apart from achieving domination over the country and establishing my magnificent Institute of Egypt, I made a marvelous discovery. In fact, I'd say it's one of the most marvelous discoveries in history, and it was all down to me. It was mid-July. I was attending some work on the west bank of the Nile on Fort St. Julien. The men were in the middle of demolishing an old wall when I spotted something strange. Among the rubble was a stone with the most peculiar markings on it. Of course, I knew it immediately had to be important, and it turns out I was right. Some might say it's one of the most important stones in history. This stone from Rosetta. Ah yeah, I can see you recognize the name. I'm sure with its secrets, we'll actually read what the ancient Egyptians wrote down. This literally means thanks to me, we will have the knowledge of a whole period of history that was hitherto unreachable to us. It will be one of my empire's greatest legacies.
You know, Rosetta is a nice name, but not as nice as Josephine. Oh, Josephine. You know how they say we French are great lovers? Let me tell you about Josephine.
Josephine was the most infuriating and interesting woman I've ever met. We had a peculiar relationship. I always thought that one day I'd see her again, but fate can be cruel like that. I digress. Before I even met Josephine, I was engaged. But upon meeting her, I must confess all other women temporarily flew from my head. We met in 1795 and were married a few months later. How to describe Josephine? A tempestuous, awful woman, really. But I loved her. Yet not long after we married and I was away, she took up with Army officer Hippolyte Charles in what was one of the most humiliating moves I've ever experienced. I don't mind sharing it with you here because, well, thanks to that blasted British newspaper, the whole world knows anyway. Who did she think she was? She betrayed me and gave ammunition to my enemies in the process. I should have, had her cast from the Empire immediately. Only I didn't. Even then, some part of me just couldn't let that woman go. Nevertheless, once I threatened her with divorce, she rarely left my side again. Of course, I took great delight in not returning the favor. Perhaps it was my own form of bitter revenge, but I took particular pleasure in parading a string of my lovers past her. Plenty came from far and wide to see if the great Napoleon Bonaparte was as good in the bedroom as he was on other fields of play, which I was, to be clear. The thing is, Josephine and I might have just continued muddying along, regardless if she had been able to give me what the French Empire demanded from its emperor. It seemed children were just not on the cards for Josephine and I. And above all else, I needed an heir. Duty must always come first. So I left her. My frustrating, terrible, wild Josephine. Instead, I married Archduchess Marie-Louise of Austria. Pretty young thing. Would have been blown away in a sharp gust of wind that was Josephine, but she was exactly what I needed. Unfortunately, I haven't seen her since I ended up on this island. I doubt I will again.
Ah, my friend, Josephine can never visit me now. Not long after I arrived here, she was taken from this planet by a chill. Perhaps it's my fate to follow her. Perhaps it's my fate to remain without her. But the hour is late. My entourage is waiting. Thank you, friend, for the scintillating conversation. I believe I must be going. That green wallpaper in my rooms won't watch itself. Farewell, mon chéri.